This story is one of a kind, and you won't believe why. The dust motes danced in the single shaft of sunlight piercing the gloom of my shop. Thorne's rare books. It sounded grander than it was. Mostly, it was just me, surrounded by silent, leather-bound witnesses to forgotten lives. I liked it that way. I considered myself a scholar of sorts, a custodian of stories. My memory was my greatest asset, an almost photographic recall of literary history, authors, editions, the nuances of paper and ink. It was a gift and a curse. The gift allowed me to thrive. The curse reminded me I couldn't forget. That afternoon, a chill snaked through the shop despite the summer heat. Mrs. Abernathy, my elderly neighbor, had mentioned the same thing earlier, complaining about an unnatural draft near her begonias. I dismissed it as old age. Then Hemlock walked in. Old man Hemlock owned an antique shop on the other side of town, a place even more cluttered and shadowy than mine. He usually dealt in, well, junk, but he occasionally stumbled upon something of interest. He was a gaunt, unsettling figure, his eyes like chips of obsidian, always watching. "Thorne," he rasped, his voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "I have something you might appreciate." He produced a book from a burlap sack. No title, no author. Just a heavy, ominous volume bound in a material I'd never seen before. It was smooth, almost supple, with a faint sheen. As I touched it, a shiver ran down my spine. "What is it bound in?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. Hemlock's lips curled into a mirthless smile. "Let's just say, it's one of a kind." I knew without him saying it. Human skin. The idea was repulsive, but the bibliophile in me, the historian, was morbidly fascinated. The price he asked was exorbitant, but I paid it without hesitation. Back in my shop, under the harsh glare of my desk lamp, I examined it more closely. The leather was meticulously stitched, almost seamless. The pages were yellowed and thick, filled with text in a language I couldn't identify. Intricate, disturbing illustrations accompanied the text. Grotesque figures, scenes of ritualistic sacrifice, landscapes that seemed to writhe and contort before my eyes. I consulted every expert I knew, contacted archives and libraries across the country. No one could identify the language. No one had ever seen anything like it. The archivist at the Boston Athenaeum, usually so composed, sounded genuinely unnerved when I described the illustrations. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice tight, "I advise you to be careful with that book." Her warning only fueled my obsession. I pored over the book day and night, neglecting my business, my sleep, my sanity. I felt drawn to it, compelled to decipher its secrets. Then, things started to change. Subtly at first. I would be reading a page, and a line of text would shift, a symbol altering its shape. I dismissed it as fatigue, a trick of the light, but it kept happening, and the changes became more personal. One day, I found a line that echoed a thought I'd had just moments before, a fleeting, insignificant thought about the price of tea. I froze. The next day, it was worse. A passage described a fear I had never voiced, a deep-seated anxiety about losing my memory, the very foundation of my identity. The book was writing itself about me. My childhood was difficult. My parents died when I was young, leaving me and my sister Clara to fend for ourselves. We were placed in a foster home, a place I tried to bury deep in my memory. I hadn't spoken of it in years, not to anyone, not even Clara. Then the book began to dredge it up. At first it was subtle, images in the illustrations that resembled the foster home, phrases that echoed conversations I'd long forgotten. Then it became explicit. The name of the foster parents, the layout of the house, the details of the incident. I started having nightmares, vivid, horrifying dreams that transported me back to that house, back to that room. I would wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, the book lying open on my chest, the pages filled with fresh, accusing text. My house became a prison. I boarded up the windows, barricaded the doors. I couldn't escape the book. It was always there, watching, waiting. I saw things in the shadows, flickering movements, distorted shapes. I heard whispers in the silence, voices calling my name. Clara called, worried. I hadn't answered her calls in weeks. "Elias, what's going on? You sound terrible." "Stay away, Clara," I croaked. "It's not safe." "What's not safe?" "Elias, are you drinking again?" "The book, Clara. It's alive." She hung up, probably thinking I'd finally lost it. Maybe I had. Then Detective Mallory showed up. She was a hard-boiled woman with a skeptical gaze and a world-weary voice. She said a neighbor had reported strange noises coming from my house. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her eyes scanning the barricaded windows, "are you all right?" I tried to explain, about the book, about the writing, about the changes. She listened patiently, her expression unchanging. "Mr. Thorne, has anyone threatened you recently? It's not a person, Detective, it's the book." She sighed. "Right. A self-writing book. And what exactly is this book doing, threatening you with overdue library fines?" I could see she didn't believe me. But she filed a report, promised to keep an eye on the neighborhood. The book intensified its assault. It filled with accusations, with graphic descriptions of the incident, with my deepest, darkest fears. It called me a coward, a liar, a monster. One night, I found a passage that made my blood run cold. It described the incident not from my perspective, but from the perspective of the other person involved. It twisted the events, painted me as the aggressor, the perpetrator. I snapped. I grabbed the book, screaming, and threw it against the wall. It bounced harmlessly to the floor. I picked it up, slammed it against my desk, tore at the pages. Nothing. The book remained intact, the text unmarred. It was indestructible. The illustrations began to move. The grotesque figures writhed and twisted, reaching out from the pages, their eyes burning with malice. The landscapes shifted and contorted, swallowing me in a vortex of darkness. I screamed, a primal, animalistic scream. I ran through the house, smashing furniture, tearing down curtains, trying to escape the book's influence. The house seemed to close in on me, the walls shrinking, the ceilings lowering. The air grew thick and suffocating. I saw a figure in the shadows, a gaunt, unsettling figure with obsidian eyes. Hemlock. He smiled, a knowing, satisfied smile. "It always comes back," he whispered. "It always finds its way home." I lunged at him, but he vanished, dissolving into the darkness. Then Clara was there, banging on the door, screaming my name. "Elias, open the door. What's happening?" I didn't want her to see me like this. I didn't want her to see the book. But it was too late. The door splintered, and she burst into the room, followed by Detective Mallory. They saw me, surrounded by the wreckage of my life, my eyes wide with terror, my body trembling uncontrollably. The book was gone. Mallory stared at the scene, her face grim. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice devoid of emotion, "I'm going to have to ask you to come with us." I didn't resist. I was numb. At the station, they questioned me for hours. I told them everything, about the book, about Hemlock, about the incident. They listened, but I could see the disbelief in their eyes. "Mr. Thorne," Mallory said finally, "we searched your house. There was no book, no sign of any struggle other than what you caused yourself. We think you might be suffering from a mental breakdown." I was released into Clara's custody. She took me to her apartment, a small, sterile space that felt alien and unfamiliar. "Elias," she said, her voice soft, "you need help." I knew she was right. But the thought of therapists, of medication, of reliving the past, it was unbearable. I spent my days staring out the window, watching the world go by. The book was gone, but its influence remained. The whispers, the shadows, the nightmares, they were all still there. I started writing, in a blank book, a simple, unadorned journal. I wanted to rewrite my story, to control the narrative, but my hand trembled as I wrote, and sometimes I would look down at the page and see words that I hadn't written, words that echoed the book's accusations, its threats, its dark prophecies. I didn't know if I was the author or the subject. One day, I sat at my desk, staring at a blank page. The silence was deafening. Then, I heard a faint whisper. I looked down at the page, and a single word began to appear. Home.